The crimson sun hung low over the dust-caked streets of Redemption Creek when the first hammer fall of the auction block echoed through the town square, silencing even the saloon's rowdy patrons. Olivia Carson clutched her 3-month-old daughter against her chest, tears streaming down her dirt-stained face as the auctioneer's voice boomed across the gathered crowd. It was 1877, a time when the West was still wild, and mercy was as scarce as rain in August. Olivia had arrived in Redemption Creek 6 months earlier, heavy with child and running from a past that had finally caught up with her. Her late husband's debts had become her burden, and the debt collectors had decided that both she and her newborn daughter would fetch a fine price as servants or worse. Next up, we got ourselves a fine young woman, not yet 25, strong back, good for cooking and cleaning. The auctioneer called out, his voice carrying over the murmurs of the crowd. And her little one comes with her, 2 for the price of 1, gentlemen. Rough hands pushed Olivia forward onto the wooden platform. She stumbled, nearly losing her grip on little Emma, whose cries pierced the air like tiny arrows. The baby sensed her mother's fear, her tiny face scrunched up in distress. Starting bid at $50 for the pair, the auctioneer shouted. Olivia scanned the crowd desperately, searching for any hint of compassion in the sea of hardened faces. Most avoided her gaze, their eyes fixed on the ground or the distant mountains. Others leered openly, their intentions clear in their hungry expressions. $50. Called a voice from the back. 60, shouted another. 75, drawled a man with yellow teeth and breath that reeked of whiskey as he stepped forward. At the edge of the crowd, partially hidden by the shadow of the mercantile, stood a tall figure. Rylan Isaacs had been passing through Redemption Creek on his way north to Montana Territory when the commotion in the town square caught his attention. A cowboy born and raised on the Texas plains, he'd seen his fair share of injustice in his 28 years, but the sight before him now froze his blood. $100, called the yellow-toothed man, eyeing Olivia like she was a prime cut of beef. 120, countered another. Rylan's hand moved to the worn grip of his Colt revolver. He wasn't a lawman or a hero from those dime novels sold back east, just a cowboy who'd spent the last decade driving cattle and sleeping under the stars. But something about the woman's desperate eyes and the infant's cries stirred something deep within him, memories of his own mother, who had died when he was young, and the sister he'd failed to protect years ago. 150, shouted Yellow Teeth, his voice triumphant. The auctioneer grinned, revealing a gold tooth that caught the late afternoon sun. 150 going once. Olivia clutched her baby tighter, her eyes closed in silent prayer. Going twice. Rylan stepped forward, his spurs jingling with each deliberate step. The crowd parted before him like water around a stone. "This ain't right," he said, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent square. The auctioneer's smile faltered. "Sir, this is a legal auction. These 2 are being sold to cover outstanding debts." "Legal don't make it right," Rylan replied, his voice calm but edged with steel. "How much?" "The current bid stands at $150. Rylan reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a leather pouch. He tossed it onto the platform, where it landed with a heavy thud. "There's 200. That should cover it and then some." The auctioneer hesitated, looking to the town sheriff who stood nearby, watching the proceedings with disinterest. "You can't just," Yellow Teeth began. "I just did," Rylan cut him off, his hand still resting on his revolver. Yellow Teeth stepped back, muttering curses under his breath. The auctioneer quickly counted the money, then nodded. "Sold to the gentleman in the black hat." Rylan stepped forward and extended his hand to Olivia. "Madam," she stared at him, confusion and fear warring in her eyes. "What happens now?" "Nothing you don't want to happen," he assured her softly. "I'm heading north. You're welcome to come along if you've got nowhere else to go." "Why would you do this?" she whispered, still not taking his hand. Rylan's eyes softened. "Because my ma taught me better than to stand by when something ain't right." Olivia hesitated a moment longer, then reached out and took his calloused hand. He helped her down from the platform, conscious of the baby cradled in her other arm. "My horse is over by the livery," he said quietly. "Can you walk? Or would you prefer to ride?" "I can walk," she replied, her voice stronger than before. They made their way through the crowd, which parted reluctantly. Yellow Teeth and a few of his companions glared at Rylan, but none made a move to stop them. The sheriff merely tipped his hat, seemingly glad to have the situation resolved without trouble in his town. At the livery, Rylan's stallion, a magnificent chestnut with a white blaze, stomped impatiently. Rylan helped Olivia secure the baby in a makeshift sling across her chest, then boosted her into the saddle. Yellow Teeth and 2 companions appeared at the entrance to the livery. "You think you can just ride off with our merchandise, cowboy?" he growled. Rylan turned slowly. "They ain't merchandise, they're people." "We had a fair auction going before you interfered," one of the others said. "Sheriff allowed it. And I paid more than the asking price," Rylan replied evenly. "Transaction's done." Yellow Teeth spat on the ground. "Maybe we don't care about the money. Maybe we had other plans for the woman." Rylan's eyes hardened. "You'd best turn around and walk away. I'm not looking for trouble, but I won't shy away from it either." The 3 men exchanged glances, weighing their odds. Rylan stood his ground, his posture relaxed but ready. After a tense moment, Yellow Teeth jerked his head and the 3 retreated, muttering threats. Rylan swung up into the saddle behind Olivia, who tensed at his proximity. "Sorry, madam. It'll be faster if we ride double until we're clear of town." She nodded silently, clutching her baby. Rylan clicked his tongue, and the stallion moved forward, its hooves kicking up dust as they rode out of Redemption Creek. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, casting long shadows across the rugged landscape. "Where are we going?" Olivia asked after they'd put a mile between themselves and the town. "There's a place to camp about an hour's ride from here," Rylan replied. "Creek with clean water, good cover. We can rest there tonight, figure out a plan tomorrow." "I don't have anything to offer you," she said quietly. "No money to repay you." "I'm not asking for anything, madam." "Olivia," she said after a moment. "Olivia Carson, and this is Emma." Rylan nodded. "Rylan Isaacs. Pleased to meet you both, though I wish it had been under better circumstances." They rode in silence as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Olivia's body gradually relaxed against his chest as exhaustion overcame her wariness. Emma had fallen asleep, her tiny breath steady and reassuring. "Those men," Olivia said finally. "They'll come after us, won't they?" Rylan considered this. "Maybe. Depends how badly they want trouble. We'll keep watch tonight just to be safe." She nodded, and he felt her shiver slightly in the cooling night air. "There's a blanket in my saddlebag," he told her. "Feel free to take it." "Thank you," she whispered, reaching for the rough wool blanket and wrapping it around herself and Emma. The camp Rylan had mentioned turned out to be a small clearing sheltered by cottonwood trees, with a narrow creek running along one side. He helped Olivia dismount, then set about making camp with practiced efficiency. Soon a small fire crackled, driving back the darkness and the autumn chill. Rylan produced jerky and hardtack from his saddlebags, along with a tin of coffee. "It ain't much," he apologized, "but it's filling." Olivia accepted the food gratefully. "It's more than we've had in days." As they ate, Rylan kept his questions to himself, though curiosity burned within him. Who was this young woman? How had she ended up on that auction block? And what would she do now? As if reading his thoughts, Olivia spoke. My husband, Thomas, died 6 months ago. Fever took him fast. After he was gone, I discovered he'd borrowed money from some dangerous men. When they came to collect, I couldn't pay. I ran, but they found me in Redemption Creek 3 days ago. I'm sorry for your loss, Rylan said sincerely. What about family? Anyone who might take you in? She shook her head. My parents died years ago. I have an aunt in California, but we haven't spoken in years, and I don't know if she'd welcome us. What about you? She asked after a moment. Do you have family somewhere? Not anymore, he replied, poking at the fire with a stick. Pa died when I was 12. Ma followed a few years later, had a sister, but He trailed off, the memories still painful after all these years. Olivia didn't press. Where were you headed before all this? Montana Territory. Got a friend who's starting a ranch up there. Offered me work as a foreman. Rylan took a sip of his coffee. It's good country. Clean air, plenty of water, fewer people. Sounds nice, she said softly, gazing down at Emma, who had awakened and was making small, contented noises. She's a quiet little thing, Rylan observed. A small smile touched Olivia's lips. Only when she's happy. You should hear her when she's hungry or needs changing. I'll take your word for it, he replied, returning her smile. They fell into a comfortable silence, the fire crackling between them. Olivia's eyelids began to droop, exhaustion finally claiming her. You should rest, Rylan said. I'll keep watch for a while. Are you sure? She asked, stifling a yawn. Go ahead. You and the little one need sleep more than I do right now. Olivia carefully arranged herself, and Emma on a bedroll Rylan had laid out, pulling the blanket over them both. Within minutes, her breathing had deepened into sleep. Rylan leaned back against his saddle, his rifle across his knees, and gazed up at the star-filled sky. He wasn't sure what had possessed him to intervene at that auction. It certainly wasn't the smartest thing he'd ever done. But watching this young woman sleep now, her arm protectively curled around her baby, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. For now, though, they were safe, and that was enough. The morning dawned clear and crisp, with a hint of frost on the grass around their camp. Rylan had dozed off in the early hours but woke before sunrise, alert to every sound in the wilderness around them. Olivia still slept, though Emma was awake, her tiny hands waving in the air. Rylan built up the fire and set coffee to boil, then checked on his horse. When he returned to the camp, Olivia was sitting up, tending to Emma. Morning, he said, keeping his distance to give her privacy. Coffee's nearly ready. Thank you, she replied, her voice still rough with sleep. For everything, I mean, not just the coffee. Rylan nodded, uncomfortable with gratitude. Hungry. I've got some dried apples left. That would be wonderful. She finished with Emma and joined him by the fire, accepting the tin cup of strong black coffee and dried fruit he offered. We should reach Bailey's Crossing by nightfall, Rylan said, studying the rising sun. Small town, but decent enough. We can get supplies there, maybe find you and Emma a safer way to travel. Olivia's face fell. You're leaving us there, I just thought. Rylan shifted uncomfortably. Figured you might prefer to make your own way once you had options. What options? She asked, a hint of bitterness in her voice. I have no money, no family nearby, and men hunting me for debt. What exactly do you think I can do in Bailey's Crossing? Rylan had no good answer. The truth was, he hadn't thought beyond getting her away from that auction block. What do you want to do, then? She looked down at Emma, then back at Rylan, her eyes filled with determination. I want to work, to earn my keep. I'm not afraid of hard labor, Mr. Isaacs. I was raised on a farm. I can cook, clean, tend animals. If your friend in Montana needs help beyond what you'll provide, I'd be grateful for the opportunity." Rylan considered this. Oscar Werner's ranch was still in its early stages, with a half-built main house and a bunkhouse for the handful of hands he'd hired. A woman's touch would be welcome, he imagined, especially one who wasn't afraid of work. "It's not an easy journey," he warned. "Another 2 weeks, at least. Weather could turn bad any day now." "Is it any harder than what we've already faced?" she countered. He conceded the point with a nod. "All right then. We'll head to Montana, but we'll still stop in Bailey's Crossing. You'll need proper clothes for the journey, and the baby will need things too." "I have no money," she reminded him. "I've got enough," he said simply. "Consider it an advance on your wages." They broke camp efficiently, Rylan showing Olivia his method for erasing signs of their presence. If Yellow Teeth and his companions were following, there was no sense making it easy for them. The day's journey was pleasant, the terrain gradually changing from arid plains to rolling hills dotted with pine and aspen. They stopped at midday to rest the horse and eat, finding a grassy spot near a small spring. While Olivia fed Emma, Rylan scouted the surrounding area, alert for any sign of pursuit. He found nothing concerning and returned to find Olivia singing softly to her daughter, a lullaby his own mother had once sung to him. "You have a nice voice," he said, settling down nearby. She looked up, a blush coloring her cheeks. "Thank you. My mother always sang to me. I hope Emma will remember these songs someday." "She will," Rylan assured her, though he had no way of knowing if this was true. "What about your mother?" Olivia asked. "You mentioned she passed when you were young." Rylan nodded, surprising himself by answering. He rarely spoke of his past. "She was strong. After Pa died, she kept our small ranch running for 3 more years before the consumption took her. Taught me everything I know about hard work and doing what's right." "She sounds wonderful," Olivia said softly. "She was," he agreed, then cleared his throat. "We should get moving if we want to reach Bailey's Crossing by dark." They continued their journey through the afternoon, Rylan now riding alongside the horse rather than on it, giving Olivia and Emma more room in the saddle. The baby had proven to be surprisingly resilient, fussing only when hungry or uncomfortable, and often watching the passing scenery with wide, curious eyes. "She's going to be an adventurer," Rylan observed during one of their brief stops. Olivia smiled, the first genuine, unworried smile he'd seen from her. Her father was the same way, never could stay in one place too long, always chasing the next opportunity. "Is that how you ended up in Redemption Creek?" Her smile faded. "Partly. Thomas heard there was gold being found nearby. He was convinced we'd make our fortune there. Instead, he caught fever from the mining camps and died within a week." "I'm sorry," Rylan said, meaning it. She shrugged, though he could see the pain behind the gesture. "He meant well. He always did. But he was a dreamer, not a planner. I should have been more careful with our money after he was gone, but I didn't realize how deep in debt we were until it was too late." Rylan wanted to tell her it wasn't her fault, that she'd been dealt a difficult hand, but he sensed she wasn't looking for reassurance. Sometimes people just needed to speak their truths aloud to make sense of them. As the sun began to set, the lights of Bailey's Crossing appeared in the distance. It wasn't much of a town, a main street with a general store, a small hotel, a livery, and a saloon, but after days on the trail, it looked like paradise. "We'll get a room at the hotel," Rylan said as they approached. "You and Emma can have a proper bed tonight. Tomorrow we'll get supplies before heading out." "1 room?" Olivia asked, a hint of wariness in her voice. "2," Rylan clarified quickly. "I wouldn't presume, I mean, that wouldn't be proper." A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. "Just checking, Mr. Isaacs." Rylan, he corrected. If we're traveling together all the way to Montana, Mr. Isaacs is going to get mighty tiresome. Rylan, she repeated, and something about the way she said his name made his chest tighten strangely. Bailey's Crossing proved to be as unremarkable as it appeared from a distance, but the hotel was clean, the beds were soft, and the bathwater was hot. Rylan secured 2 adjoining rooms, ensuring Olivia and Emma had their privacy while remaining close enough to protect if needed. After settling in, Rylan went to the hotel's small dining room to arrange for food to be sent up. The proprietor's wife, a motherly woman named Mrs. Timmons, took an immediate interest in his story. A young mother and her baby, you say, traveling all the way to Montana. She clucked her tongue. She'll need proper gear for that journey. Winter comes early in the mountains. That's why we stopped here, Rylan explained. Need to get supplies before we continue. Mrs. Timmons narrowed her eyes, assessing him. And what's your relationship to this young woman, if I might ask? Rylan shifted uncomfortably. Just helping out someone in need, madam. To his surprise, Mrs. Timmons smiled. Good answer. Too many men these days would make claims they've no right to make. I'll have a hot meal sent up for both of you, and see if I can find some baby things we've got stored away from when our grandchildren visit. That's mighty kind of you, madam. Not kindness, young man, common decency. She patted his arm. Now go on, get yourself cleaned up. You look like you've been dragged through every dusty trail from here to Texas. Rylan grinned. Yes, madam. Back upstairs, he knocked softly on Olivia's door. She opened it slightly, peering out cautiously. Food's coming up soon, he told her. And the proprietor's wife is sending some things for Emma. That's very kind, Olivia said, opening the door wider. She had washed the trail dust from her face and combed her auburn hair, which hung loose around her shoulders. The simple act of cleaning up had transformed her, revealing a natural beauty that had been hidden beneath layers of exhaustion and fear. Rylan found himself staring and quickly looked away. I'll be next door if you need anything. We can make plans for tomorrow over breakfast. Thank you, Rylan, she said softly, for everything. I know I keep saying it, but I truly mean it. You don't have to keep thanking me, he replied. Anyone would have done the same. No, she said firmly. They wouldn't. Most people walked right past us in that town square. You didn't. Rylan had no response to that. He simply nodded and retreated to his own room, where he stripped off his trail-worn clothes and poured water into the basin to wash away days of dust and sweat. As he cleaned up, his thoughts kept returning to Olivia and the journey ahead. Taking her to Montana was the right thing to do, he was certain of that. Oscar Werner was a good man who would treat her fairly. She would have work, a roof over her head and safety for herself and her child. It was the best outcome he could arrange for her. So why did the thought of delivering her to the Werner ranch and continuing on his way leave him feeling so hollow? The following morning, Rylan woke early and went downstairs to arrange for breakfast. Mrs. Timmons was already up, supervising the kitchen. Your young lady is already in the dining room, she informed him. Baby's sleeping like an angel. I found some things for them, a proper carrying sling, some soft blankets and clothes the little one can grow into. That's very generous, Rylan said. What do I owe you for them, Mrs.? Timmons waved a dismissive hand. Consider it my contribution to your journey. Just promise you'll take good care of them. I will, madam. In the dining room, Olivia sat at a corner table, Emma sleeping peacefully in a basket beside her. She looked up as Rylan entered, her face breaking into a warm smile that transformed her entire appearance. Rested and clean, with her hair neatly braided and wearing a fresh dress borrowed from Mrs. Timmons, she was strikingly beautiful. Good morning, she greeted him. I hope you slept well. Like a log, he admitted, taking the seat across from her. You, better than I have in months, she replied. A real bed makes such a difference. They ate a hearty breakfast of eggs, bacon, biscuits, and strong coffee, planning their day as they did so. The general store would be their first stop for supplies, followed by the livery to check on Rylan's horse and possibly acquire a second mount for Olivia. I can ride, she assured him when he suggested this. I grew up riding bareback on my father's farm. A proper saddle would be a luxury. It's a long journey, Rylan pointed out. Having your own horse would make it easier on both of us. She conceded the point, though he could see worry in her eyes at the expense. He wanted to reassure her that money wasn't an issue. He'd been saving his earnings for years, living simply and spending little, but he sensed her pride would make such reassurances unwelcome. After breakfast, they headed to the general store, where the shopkeeper, a balding man named Harkins, greeted them with barely concealed curiosity. News of their arrival had clearly spread through the small town overnight. Heading to Montana, I hear, Harkins said as he helped them gather supplies. Bold move this time of year. We'll be fine, Rylan said firmly. Just need the right gear. They selected warm clothing for all three of them, including a small sheepskin coat for Emma that made Olivia's eyes mist over with emotion. Food supplies came next: flour, coffee, beans, salt pork, dried fruit, and other staples that would sustain them on the journey. As they were completing their purchases, the door to the store opened and three men entered. Rylan tensed immediately, recognizing the swagger and the yellow teeth of the lead man. Well, Yellow Teeth drawled. Fancy meeting you folks here. Rylan subtly moved to place himself between Olivia and the newcomers. Didn't expect to see you again, he said, his voice neutral but his posture ready. Bet you didn't, Yellow Teeth agreed. But you see, we got to thinking about our business arrangement and it just didn't sit right. Woman owes a debt, and that debt ain't been properly settled. I paid fair and square, Rylan countered. More than the highest bid. Maybe so, but the auction wasn't legal to start with, Yellow Teeth grinned. Sheriff in Redemption Creek admitted as much once we pressed him. So that means our claim on the woman and child still stands. Harkins, the shopkeeper, looked nervously between the two parties. Gentlemen, if there's going to be trouble, I'd appreciate it if you'd take it outside. No trouble, Yellow Teeth assured him. Long as the cowboy here hands over what's ours. She's not yours, Rylan said, his hand moving to rest on his revolver. She's not anyone's. The tension in the room was palpable. Olivia had backed away, holding Emma protectively against her chest, her eyes wide with fear. Yellow Teeth's companions spread out slightly, their hands hovering near their weapons. 3 against 1, Cowboy. Those ain't good odds. Depends on the one, Rylan replied calmly. The standoff might have erupted into violence then, and there if not for the timely arrival of Bailey's Crossing's sheriff, a grizzled man in his 50s with a stern expression and a shotgun in his hands. Heard we had visitors causing a stir, he said, his eyes moving from Yellow Teeth to Rylan. Someone want to tell me what's going on here? Yellow Teeth adopted an ingratiating smile. Just a misunderstanding about property, Sheriff. This man stole something that belongs to us, and we've come to reclaim it. She's not property, Rylan said through gritted teeth. She's a person with a child, and I paid good money at their auction to ensure their freedom. The sheriff's bushy eyebrows rose. Auction of people? That ain't legal in this territory, hasn't been for some time. That's what I'm saying, Yellow Teeth wheedled. The auction wasn't legal, so his purchase ain't valid. And what claim do you have on this woman? The sheriff asked, turning his attention to Olivia, who stood trembling by the counter. Her husband borrowed money, Yellow Teeth explained. Died before he could repay it. Debt falls to her now. The sheriff frowned. Debt collection's a civil matter. You go to a judge, get a judgment, maybe seize property to cover it. You don't auction off the widow and her baby. Sheriff, Yellow Teeth began, but the lawman cut him off. I don't want to hear it. You boys have two choices. You can file a proper claim with the circuit judge next time he comes through, or you can leave town now and forget the whole thing. But there won't be any taking of people while I'm wearing this badge. Yellow Teeth's face darkened with anger, but he was smart enough not to challenge an armed sheriff in his own town. This ain't over, he muttered, glaring at Rylan. We'll be seeing you again. Looking forward to it, Rylan replied evenly. The three men backed out of the store, their postures radiating frustrated menace. The sheriff turned to Rylan. You folks planning to stay in town long? Just passing through, Rylan explained. Getting supplies before heading north. Might be wise to leave sooner rather than later, the sheriff advised. Those three aren't the type to give up easily. Thank you for your help, Sheriff, Olivia said, her voice small but steady. The lawman tipped his hat to her. Just doing my job, madam. Those men have no right to you or your child, regardless of what debt your husband might have left behind. But they don't seem the type to be constrained by what's right. After the sheriff departed, Harkins hurriedly completed their transaction, clearly eager to have the potential for trouble out of his store. Rylan paid for their supplies, arranged for them to be delivered to the livery, and ushered Olivia outside. We should leave today, he said quietly as they walked toward the livery. Those men won't give up. Olivia nodded, her face pale but determined. I'm ready. The sooner we reach Montana, the better. At the livery, they found Rylan's chestnut stallion well-rested and eager for the trail. The livery owner, a wiry man named Perkins, showed them a gentle mare he was willing to sell, a bay with a white star on her forehead and kind eyes. She's got a smooth gait, Perkins assured them. Good with inexperienced riders, and she don't spook easy. Olivia approached the mare cautiously, letting the horse sniff her hand before gently stroking its neck. She's beautiful. She's yours if you want her, Rylan said. Along with a proper saddle. Olivia bit her lip. It's too much, Rylan. I can't accept. It's an investment, he interrupted. In our journey, in getting to Montana safely, consider it part of your employment if that makes it easier to accept. She studied his face for a moment, then nodded. All right, but I will repay you once I'm earning my own way. The transaction was quickly completed, and Perkins helped them outfit the mare with a woman's saddle, complete with a horn and a more secure seat that would make it easier for Olivia to ride while holding Emma. As they prepared to leave, Mrs. Timmons arrived at the livery with a basket of food for their journey and additional baby items she insisted Olivia take. The nearest town with decent supplies is 4 days' ride from here, she explained. You'll need these things for the little one. Olivia embraced the older woman, tears in her eyes. I don't know how to thank you. Just get safely to wherever you're going, Mrs. Timmons replied. And perhaps write to let me know you made it. It's not often we get travelers passing through who leave such an impression. They loaded their supplies onto the horses, secured Emma in her new carrying sling across Olivia's chest, and prepared to depart. The sheriff appeared as they were mounting up. Those three left town about an hour ago, he informed them. Headed east, but I wouldn't put it past them to circle around and follow you. Keep your eyes open. We will, Rylan assured him. Thank you, Sheriff. Good luck to you, the lawman replied, tipping his hat to Olivia. Safe travels. With that, they rode out of Bailey's Crossing, heading north toward the distant mountains that marked the Montana Territory. The day was clear, the air crisp with the promise of approaching winter, but the sun was warm on their backs as they rode side by side along the rutted trail. Do you think they'll really come after us? Olivia asked after they'd put several miles between themselves and the town. Rylan considered this. Men like that don't like to lose, and they seem to think they have a legitimate claim on you. But the sheriff said, "Law's different out here," Rylan explained. "What's legal in one town might not be in another, and some men don't much care about the law either way." Olivia fell silent, her expression troubled. "Don't worry," Rylan added. "I won't let them take you or Emma. We've got a good head start, and I know this country better than they do. We'll make it to Montana long before they can catch up." She looked over at him, her eyes searching his face. "Why are you doing all this for us, Rylan? The truth this time." Rylan shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. The question had been floating between them since Redemption Creek, but he still wasn't sure of the answer himself. "I told you about my sister," he said finally. "What I didn't tell you is that she was taken by men not unlike Yellow Teeth and his friends. I was 16, working a cattle drive. By the time I got home, she was gone. Ma was half dead with grief. We never found her." Olivia's eyes filled with compassion. "I'm so sorry, Rylan," he shrugged, though the old pain still tightened his chest. "It was a long time ago. But when I saw you on that auction block, holding your baby, something just snapped inside me. I couldn't stand by and watch it happen again." "So I remind you of your sister?" she asked softly. "No," he replied, meeting her gaze. "You remind me that there are still things in this world worth fighting for." A flush colored her cheeks, and she looked away, her hand moving to stroke Emma's head gently. They rode in companionable silence after that, each lost in their own thoughts as the landscape gradually changed around them. The plains gave way to foothills, and the scattered cottonwoods along creek beds were replaced by stands of pine and fir that grew thicker as they progressed northward. By late afternoon, dark clouds had gathered on the horizon, promising rain. Rylan led them to a sheltered spot beside a small stream, where a cluster of rocks would provide some protection from the wind. "We should make camp," he said, dismounting. "Weather's turning." Olivia nodded, carefully swinging down from her mare, her movements growing more confident with practice. Emma had slept for much of the journey, lulled by the horse's steady gait, but now she was awake and beginning to fuss. "She's hungry," Olivia explained, settling on a fallen log and adjusting her dress to feed the baby. Rylan busied himself setting up camp, giving her privacy while still keeping an eye on their surroundings. The first drops of rain began to fall as he finished erecting a small canvas shelter, just large enough for Olivia and Emma to sleep under if the weather worsened. By the time Olivia had fed and changed the baby, Rylan had a small fire going and coffee brewing. The rain fell steadily now, but their camp was relatively dry beneath the dense pine boughs overhead. "It's beautiful here," Olivia observed, gazing around at the pine forest and the mist-shrouded hills beyond. "So different from where I grew up." "Where was that?" Rylan asked, pouring her a cup of coffee. "Missouri," she replied. "Farm country. Flat and open, with cornfields as far as you could see. Nothing like these mountains. Montana's even more beautiful," he told her. "Valleys so green they hurt your eyes in spring, mountains that touch the sky, rivers full of fish bigger than your arm. You've spent time there before." He nodded. "Worked a few seasons on ranches in the territory. It's good country. Hard, but good." "And your friend, the one starting the ranch, how do you know him?" "Oscar Werner. We drove cattle together from Texas to Kansas more times than I can count. He was the best trail boss I ever knew. Fair but tough when he needed to be. When he inherited some money from an uncle back east, he decided to stake his claim in Montana. Asked me to come help him build it up." "And will you stay there? Make it your home?" Rylan hesitated. "Never thought that far ahead." "Always been a drifter, moving with the seasons and the work, but I'm not getting any younger. Maybe it's time to put down roots somewhere." "I know what you mean," Olivia said softly. "After Thomas died, I felt so untethered, like a leaf blown by the wind. I want Emma to have what I had growing up, a home, a place she belongs." "She will," Rylan assured her. "Oscar will give you both a fair chance." The conversation turned to practical matters, then how far they might travel each day, what route they would take, what challenges they might face. The rain continued steadily, but their small camp remained relatively dry and warm. As darkness fell, Olivia retired to the shelter with Emma, while Rylan wrapped himself in his bedroll near the fire, his rifle close at hand. Sleep came easily to him that night, despite the rain and the nagging worry about Yellow Teeth and his companions. Something about having Olivia and Emma nearby brought him a peace he hadn't felt in years. The next few days fell into a rhythm as they traveled steadily northward. The weather alternated between rain and autumn sunshine, growing cooler as they gained elevation. Olivia proved to be a natural horsewoman, quickly adapting to the mare's gait and even taking the lead at times when the trail narrowed. Emma continued to be a remarkably good traveler, sleeping through much of the journey and fussing only when hungry or uncomfortable. Rylan found himself increasingly fascinated by the tiny human, watching her discover her hands, react to sounds and movements, and occasionally favor them with toothless grins that inexplicably warmed his heart. On the evening of their fourth day out of Bailey's Crossing, they made camp in a sheltered valley with a clear view of the surrounding terrain. As Olivia prepared their simple meal, Rylan checked their back trail with his spyglass, a habit he'd maintained throughout their journey. "See anything?" Olivia asked, noticing his frown. "Not sure," he replied, focusing the glass on a distant ridge. "Might be nothing, might be riders," she tensed. "Yellow Teeth. Can't tell from here," Rylan admitted, collapsing the spyglass. "But we should assume the worst. We'll leave at first light, try to put more distance between us." That night, Rylan slept lightly, waking at every sound. By dawn, he was already up, saddling the horses and loading their gear. "They're definitely following us," he told Olivia as she emerged from their shelter, Emma cradled in her arms. "I saw campfire smoke about 5 miles back, just before sunrise." "What do we do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "We ride hard today," he replied. "There's a settlement called Elk Fork about 30 miles north of here. We can reach it by nightfall if we push." They ate a quick breakfast, packed the remaining gear, and were on the trail as the first rays of sunlight crested the eastern mountains. Rylan set a brisk pace, but remained attentive to Olivia's comfort and Emma's needs, stopping regularly to rest the horses and allow Olivia to tend to her daughter. By midday, they had covered nearly 15 miles, the terrain growing increasingly rugged as they approached a mountain pass that would lead them into the next valley. During a brief stop to water the horses, Rylan again checked their back trail. "They're gaining on us," he said grimly. 3 riders moving fast. "How far behind?" Olivia asked, securing Emma in her sling. "Maybe 3 hours," Rylan estimated, "but we've got a tough stretch ahead. The pass slows everyone down." The mountain pass proved as challenging as Rylan had warned, a steep, winding trail that sometimes disappeared entirely among tumbled boulders and scree slopes. Rylan led the way, occasionally dismounting to guide Olivia's mare through particularly difficult sections. By late afternoon, they had crested the pass and begun their descent into the valley beyond. The settlement of Elk Fork was visible in the distance, a cluster of buildings nestled beside a river that gleamed silver in the waning sunlight. "We'll make it before dark," Rylan said, relief evident in his voice. It was then that the shot rang out, echoing off the mountainsides like thunder. Rylan's stallion reared, nearly unseating him, while Olivia's mare shied violently to one side. "Get down!" Rylan shouted, drawing his revolver and scanning the slopes above them. Olivia slid from her saddle, clutching Emma protectively as she sought cover behind a large boulder. Rylan dismounted more carefully, keeping his eyes on the ridge where he suspected the shot had originated. "Yellow teeth." Olivia called from her position. "Has to be," Rylan replied. "They must have circled around while we were crossing the pass, got ahead of us somehow." Another shot cracked through the air, this one closer, chipping stone from the boulder where Olivia hid. "Stay there," Rylan ordered. "I'm going to try to get a better position." Before she could protest, he was moving, staying low as he worked his way along the edge of the trail toward a stand of pine trees that would provide better cover. A third shot kicked up dirt at his heels, but he reached the trees safely. From his new vantage point, Rylan could make out movement on a ridge about 200 yards away, three figures working their way down toward the trail, using the terrain for cover. "Olivia," he called, keeping his voice low. "When I start shooting, I want you to get back on your horse and ride for Elk Fork as fast as you can. Don't wait for me." "I'm not leaving you," she protested. "You have to," he insisted. "Emma needs you. I'll catch up." Before she could argue further, Rylan took careful aim at the approaching figures and fired. The shot went wide, but it forced Yellow Teeth and his companions to take cover. Rylan fired again, then again, forcing them to keep their heads down. "Now, Olivia," he shouted. "Go." He saw her hesitate for just a moment before she dashed to her mare, mounted swiftly despite Emma's presence, and kicked the horse into motion. The mare responded instantly, breaking into a gallop down the trail toward Elk Fork. Yellow Teeth and his companions, seeing their quarry escaping, abandoned caution and rushed forward, firing wildly. Rylan continued to shoot, deliberately now, forcing them to seek cover again. His stallion had bolted when the shooting began, but Rylan spotted him a short distance away, cropping grass nervously at the edge of the trees. With a sharp whistle, he called the horse to him, then swung into the saddle and spurred the animal after Olivia's rapidly disappearing figure. Bullets whined past his head as he rode, but Yellow Teeth and his men were too far away now for accurate shooting, and the winding trail soon took Rylan out of their line of fire. He caught up to Olivia about a mile down the trail, her mare slowed to a canter now that the immediate danger had passed. Emma was crying, frightened by the sudden movement and the noise of gunfire. "Are you both all right?" Rylan asked, bringing his stallion alongside her mare. Olivia nodded, her face pale but composed. "We're fine. Not a scratch," he assured her. "But they'll be coming after us. We need to reach Elk Fork before they catch up." They rode hard for the next hour, the settlement growing steadily larger before them. Rylan kept one eye on their back trail, but saw no sign of pursuit. As they approached Elk Fork, the buildings revealed themselves to be a small but thriving community: a general store, a church, a livery, several houses, and what appeared to be a combination hotel and saloon. People moved about on the single dusty street, and smoke rose from chimneys against the darkening sky. They rode directly to the hotel, where Rylan helped Olivia dismount before swinging down from his own horse. "Wait here," he said, tying both horses to the hitching rail. "I'll get us rooms and see about finding the local law." The hotel's small lobby was warm and surprisingly well appointed for such a remote settlement. A middle-aged man with spectacles looked up from behind the desk as Rylan entered. "Evening, stranger," he greeted. "Looking for a room?" "Two, if you have them," Rylan replied. "My friend and her baby are outside. We've had some trouble on the trail. The clerk's expression sharpened with interest. "What kind of trouble?" "The kind that involves men with guns," Rylan said flatly. "Is there a sheriff or marshal in town?" "Sheriff Blackburn," the clerk replied. "His office is down at the end of the street, but he's likely at the saloon this time of evening." Rylan nodded. "I'll find him. Can I get those rooms now? The lady and her child need rest." The clerk produced a register and a key. "Only got one room available, I'm afraid. 2 beds, though. Best I can do." Rylan hesitated, then nodded. "It'll have to do, just for tonight." After paying for the room, he returned to Olivia, who was soothing Emma with gentle bouncing motions. "Got us a room," he told her. "Only one available, but it has 2 beds. I'll sleep on the floor." "Don't be ridiculous," she replied. "After everything you've done, I'm not going to make you sleep on the floor. We're adults. We can share a room properly." Rylan felt his face warm slightly at her matter-of-fact tone. "If you're sure." "I'm sure," she said firmly. "Now, is there a doctor in town? I want to have Emma checked, just to be certain the journey hasn't been too much for her." "We'll ask at the hotel," Rylan promised. "But first, let's get you both settled." The room was small but clean, with 2 narrow beds, a washstand, and a small table with 2 chairs. A window overlooked the main street, giving them a clear view of anyone approaching the hotel. Olivia immediately set about making Emma comfortable, changing her and feeding her while Rylan brought up their most essential belongings from the horses. The baby, exhausted from the day's excitement, soon fell into a deep sleep. "I need to find the sheriff," Rylan said quietly, watching Olivia tuck Emma into a makeshift bed fashioned from a drawer lined with blankets. "Tell him about Yellow Teeth and his friends. Will you be all right here for a bit?" Olivia nodded. "We'll be fine. Just be careful, Rylan. Those men are dangerous." "So am I when I need to be," he replied with a slight smile. "Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone but me." The saloon portion of the hotel was doing a brisk business when Rylan entered, the room filled with the sounds of conversation, laughter, and a slightly out-of-tune piano. He scanned the crowd, looking for anyone who might be the sheriff. His eyes settled on a large man seated at a corner table, a star-shaped badge pinned to his vest. The man was nursing a whiskey, his weathered face set in lines of perpetual wariness that Rylan recognized as the mark of a lawman who had seen too much. "Sheriff Blackburn?" Rylan asked, approaching the table. The man looked up, assessing Rylan with a quick, professional glance. "That's right. What can I do for you?" "Name's Rylan Isaacs," he introduced himself. "Just rode in with a young woman and her baby. We've got trouble following us." Blackburn gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Have a seat, Mr. Isaacs." "What kind of trouble?" Rylan sat and explained the situation, beginning with the auction in Redemption Creek and ending with the ambush attempt on the trail that afternoon. Blackburn listened without interruption, occasionally sipping his whiskey. "So these men claim the woman owes them a debt," the sheriff clarified when Rylan had finished. "That's what they say," Rylan confirmed. "But they tried to auction her and her baby to pay it, which can't be legal." Blackburn shook his head. "It's not. Not in this territory anyway, but men like that don't much care about the law." "That's what I told Olivia," Rylan agreed. "Will you help us?" The sheriff considered this. "I'll keep an eye out for these men. If they show up in my town causing trouble, they'll answer for it. But my jurisdiction ends at the town limits." "That's all I'm asking," Rylan assured him. "We're just passing through, heading to Montana territory. If we can rest here safely for a night or 2, we'll be on our way." "Montana, eh?" Blackburn looked thoughtful. "That's still a good week's ride, assuming the weather holds. First snow could come any day now in the high country." "We'll manage," Rylan said confidently. "Olivia's tougher than she looks. A slight smile lifted the corner of Blackburn's mouth. "Must be to catch the eye of a man like you." Rylan felt himself flush. "It's not like that. I'm just helping her get to safety." "If you say so," the sheriff replied, clearly unconvinced. "In any case, you're welcome in Elk Fork as long as you keep the peace. I'll have my deputy keep an eye on the trails into town. Let me know if those men show up." "Thank you, Sheriff," Rylan said, rising from his seat. "One more thing," Blackburn added. "There's a lady doctor in town, name's Dr. Wallace, lives in the White House behind the church. If your friend wants her baby checked over, that's where to go." Rylan thanked him again and returned to the hotel room where Olivia was sitting by the window, watching the street below while Emma slept. "Any sign of them?" he asked, closing the door behind him. She shook her head. "Not yet." "Did you find the sheriff?" "I did," Rylan confirmed, removing his hat and hanging it on a peg by the door. "He'll keep an eye out for Yellow Teeth and his friends. Also told me there's a woman doctor in town if you still want Emma checked tomorrow." "I would, yes," Olivia said, relief evident in her voice. "How long can we stay here?" "A day or two," Rylan replied. "We need to resupply anyway, and the horses could use the rest. But we can't linger too long. Weather in the mountains can turn quickly this time of year." Olivia nodded, her gaze returning to the window. "I keep thinking about what might have happened if you hadn't come along when you did. In Redemption Creek, I mean." Rylan sat on the edge of one of the beds, removing his boots. "No point dwelling on what didn't happen." "I can't help it," she said softly. "I've never been so afraid as I was on that auction block, holding Emma and knowing what those men intended for us." She turned to look at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "You saved us, Rylan, truly saved us." "Anyone would have—" "No," she interrupted. "They wouldn't. Most people don't care about a widow and her baby. Most people look the other way when something isn't right because it's easier. But not you." Rylan didn't know how to respond to the naked gratitude in her eyes. He'd never been good with words, especially when it came to feelings. So he simply nodded and said, "You should get some rest. Tomorrow we'll see the doctor, get supplies, and make a plan for the rest of our journey." Olivia seemed to understand his discomfort, giving him a small smile before moving to check on Emma one last time. As she bent over the makeshift crib, Rylan found himself watching the gentle way she tucked the blankets around her daughter, murmuring soft words of love. Something stirred in his chest, a feeling he couldn't quite name, a warmth that had been growing steadily since that first day in Redemption Creek. He turned away quickly, busying himself with arranging his gear, unsettled by the intensity of his reaction. They retired to their separate beds soon after, the day's exhaustion catching up with them. Rylan lay awake for a time, listening to Olivia's steady breathing from the other bed and the occasional soft sounds Emma made in her sleep. He'd meant what he said to Sheriff Blackburn. He was just helping Olivia get to safety. Once they reached Oscar Werner's ranch in Montana, she would have a place for herself and Emma, and he would move on as he always did. That was the plan. So why did the thought of leaving them behind make him feel so empty? Morning came with a wash of golden light through the hotel window and the distant sounds of a town coming to life. Rylan woke instantly, his hand moving to his revolver before he remembered where they were. Olivia was already up, sitting by the window with Emma in her arms, feeding her quietly. She looked over as Rylan stirred, a soft smile on her face. "Good morning," she said quietly. "You were sleeping so soundly I didn't want to wake you." Rylan sat up, running a hand through his tousled hair. "How long have you been up?" "Not long," she replied. "Emma woke hungry about an hour ago." He nodded. Taking in the peaceful domestic scene, they presented mother and child bathed in morning sunlight. a picture of gentle contentment that seemed at odds with the dangerous journey that had brought them here. "I'll check with the sheriff, see if there's been any sign of yellow teeth," Rylan said, pulling on his boots. "Then we can visit that doctor and get supplies." "I'd like to get Emma some proper clothes," Olivia added, "and perhaps something for myself. These borrowed dresses from Mrs. Timmons are kind but not quite suitable for the trail." Rylan smiled. "Get whatever you need. We want to travel light but not at the expense of comfort." He left Olivia to finish with Emma while he went downstairs. The hotel's small dining area was serving breakfast, and the smell of coffee and bacon made his stomach growl appreciatively. After a hearty meal, Rylan headed to the sheriff's office, where he found Deputy Moore, a young man with an eager expression and a nervous habit of adjusting his gun belt. "No sign of those men you described," Moore reported. "Sheriff's riding the Eastern Trail right now, just to be sure. But if they were going to show up, they'd likely have done so by now." Rylan wasn't entirely convinced, but he nodded his thanks and returned to the hotel to share the news with Olivia. They spent the morning visiting Dr. Wallace, a stern-faced woman in her 40s who examined Emma with gentle, experienced hands. "She's a healthy little thing," the doctor pronounced. "Strong lungs, good color, responding well to stimuli. You've taken good care of her despite your difficult circumstances." Olivia beamed with pride and relief. "Thank you, doctor. That means everything to me." They moved on to the general store, where Olivia selected several practical dresses and a warm coat for herself, along with baby clothes, diapers, and other necessities for Emma. Rylan added to their supplies with ammunition, preserved food, medical items, and other trail essentials. As they were completing their purchases, Olivia lingered over a small display of jewelry, her fingers lightly touching a simple silver locket. "It's beautiful," she murmured. Rylan noticed her interest. "Would you like it?" She shook her head quickly. "No, no, it's an unnecessary expense. I was just looking." After they had paid and arranged for their supplies to be delivered to the hotel, Rylan made an excuse about checking on the horses and returned to the general store alone. The locket was still there, gleaming softly in the afternoon light. Without hesitation, he purchased it, tucking the small package into his pocket. Back at the hotel, Olivia was preparing Emma for her nap, singing softly as she rocked the child. She looked up as Rylan entered, her smile warming him more than the fire crackling in the small hearth. "Everything all right with the horses?" she asked. "Just fine," he replied, crossing to stand beside her. "I have something for you." She looked puzzled as he produced the small package from his pocket and held it out to her. "Rylan, you didn't need to, I wanted to," he interrupted gently. "Go on, open it." With Emma balanced in one arm, Olivia unwrapped the package, her eyes widening as the silver locket gleamed against the plain paper. "It's beautiful," she whispered, looking up at him with an expression that made his heart skip a beat. "I thought you might like to put a bit of Emma's hair in it," he suggested. "Or maybe a small picture when we get to Montana and find a photographer." "That's a wonderful idea," she agreed, her eyes shining. "Would you help me put it on?" Rylan took the delicate chain from her, stepping behind her as she held her hair aside. His fingers fumbled slightly with the tiny clasp, hyper-aware of her closeness, the scent of her hair, the warmth of her skin as his fingers brushed against her neck. "There," he said, his voice oddly husky as he stepped back. Olivia turned to face him, one hand going to the locket now resting against her collarbone. "Thank you, Rylan. I'll treasure it always." There was a moment brief but electric when something unspoken passed between them. Rylan found himself leaning slightly forward, drawn by some invisible force. Olivia's lips parted, her eyes darkening with an emotion he dared not name. The spell was broken by Emma, who chose that moment to sneeze, then giggle at her own surprise. Both adults laughed, the tension of the moment dissipating. "I should get her down for her nap," Olivia said, a flush coloring her cheeks. "And I should check if our supplies are ready," Rylan agreed, backing toward the door. "We'll leave at first light tomorrow if that suits you." "It does," she replied, her fingers still absently touching the locket. Rylan spent the remainder of the day making final preparations for their journey, conferring with the livery owner about the best routes to take and checking their horses' shoes one final time. He also met again with Sheriff Blackburn, who reported no sign of Yellow Teeth and his companions. "Doesn't mean they've given up," the sheriff warned. "Just that they're not stupid enough to ride into a town with a lawman." "We'll keep our eyes open," Rylan promised. That evening, they enjoyed a proper meal in the hotel's dining room, Emma sleeping peacefully in a basket beside their table. The normalcy of the scene sitting across from Olivia in the warm glow of lamplight, discussing their plans for the journey ahead, struck Rylan as both strange and wonderful. For a man who had spent most of his adult life alone on the trail, this brief taste of family life was as intoxicating as it was unfamiliar. "Tell me more about this ranch in Montana," Olivia said as they lingered over coffee. "What will it be like?" Rylan described what he knew of Oscar Werner's property, a sprawling tract of land in a valley south of Helena, with a river running through it and mountains rising on three sides. The main house was still under construction, with a bunkhouse for the ranch hands and various outbuildings already completed. "Oscar's a dreamer, but a practical one," Rylan explained. "He wants to build something that will last, a legacy for future generations." "He sounds like a good man," Olivia observed. "One of the best I've known," Rylan agreed. "You and Emma will be in good hands there." Something flickered in Olivia's eyes, disappointment perhaps, but it was gone so quickly that Rylan wondered if he'd imagined it. "And you?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. "Will you stay at the ranch too?" Rylan hesitated. The question touched on thoughts he'd been avoiding since they left Redemption Creek. "I don't know," he admitted finally. "Oscar offered me a permanent position as foreman, but I've never been one to settle in one place for long." "Why is that, do you think?" Olivia pressed gently. Rylan stared into his coffee cup, considering. "Never found a reason to stay, I suppose. There's always been another horizon, another trail." "And now?" Her question was soft, almost tentative. Rylan looked up, meeting her gaze across the table. The answer that rose to his lips surprised him with its certainty. "Now I might have a reason," but fear held the words back. "Instead," he said, "now I'm focused on getting you and Emma safely to Montana. We'll figure out the rest when we get there." Disappointment definitely crossed her face this time, but she nodded and changed the subject to more practical matters. Back in their room, they prepared for their final night in Elk Fork. Rylan checked and rechecked their gear while Olivia bathed Emma in a small tin tub provided by the hotel staff. The domesticity of the scene, Olivia kneeling beside the tub, gently washing her daughter while singing a soft lullaby. Emma splashing happily in the warm water created an ache in Rylan's chest that he couldn't quite identify. It felt like longing, but for what, he wasn't entirely sure. That night, as he lay in his narrow bed listening to Olivia's and Emma's steady breathing from across the room, Rylan found himself imagining a different life than the one he'd always led. A life with a home, a family, roots. A life with Olivia and Emma. The thought terrified him as much as it enticed him. He'd been alone for so long, responsible only for himself, that the idea of being responsible for others, for a woman and a child, seemed overwhelming. And yet, hadn't he already taken on that responsibility the moment he put down his money in Redemption Creek? Sleep eluded him for much of the night, his mind churning with possibilities and fears. By the time dawn lightened the sky outside their window, he had reached no conclusions, only a certainty that whatever happened next would change his life irrevocably. They departed Elk Fork as planned, just as the sun was cresting the eastern mountains. Sheriff Blackburn saw them off, reiterating his warnings about Yellow Teeth and his companions. "Keep your eyes open and your powder dry," the lawman advised, "and good luck to you both." The trail northward took them through increasingly rugged terrain, the mountains rising around them like sentinels. Autumn was in full display, the aspen groves blazing gold against the dark green of pine forests, the air crisp and filled with the scent of fallen leaves. Olivia rode confidently now, managing her mare with ease even with Emma secured in the carrying sling across her chest. She seemed to have found a new strength since their encounter with Yellow Teeth, a determination that manifested in her straight-backed posture and the set of her jaw. They made good progress that first day, stopping only to rest the horses and tend to Emma's needs. By nightfall, they had covered nearly 20 miles, camping in a protected hollow beside a small mountain stream. As Olivia fed Emma by the fire, she looked up at Rylan with an expression of contentment that warmed him more than the flames. "I never thought I'd say this, given everything that's happened," she said softly, "but I'm happier now than I've been in a very long time." Rylan paused in his task of checking their supplies. "Even with men chasing us and winter coming on," she nodded. "Even with all that. For the first time since Thomas died, I feel like I have a future to look forward to. Like Emma and I aren't just surviving, but actually living." "I'm glad," Rylan said, meaning it. "You deserve that chance, both of you." "So do you," she replied, her eyes steady on his face. Before he could respond, a distant sound caught his attention, the unmistakable crack of a branch breaking beneath a heavy weight. Rylan's hand moved instantly to his revolver. "What is it?" Olivia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not sure," he replied, equally quietly. "Could be nothing, could be trouble. Stay here with Emma." Carefully, moving as silently as years on the trail had taught him, Rylan circled their camp, using the shadows of the trees for cover. The night was clear, with a 3/4 moon providing enough light to see by, but also enough shadows to hide in. He had nearly completed his circuit when he caught a glint of metal in the moonlight, a rifle barrel, poorly concealed among the trees about 50 yards from their camp. Rylan froze, assessing the situation. There was at least one person watching their camp, possibly more. Yellow Teeth had found them. Moving with deliberate caution, Rylan worked his way back to camp, staying in the shadows and making as little noise as possible. Olivia's eyes widened with fear when she saw his expression. "They're here," she whispered. He nodded grimly. "At least one, maybe more. Watching us from the trees to the north." "What do we do?" "We need to move," Rylan said decisively. "Now, while we still have the advantage of knowing they are there." Working quickly but quietly, they packed up their camp, Rylan dousing the fire while Olivia secured Emma in her sling and prepared the horses. They left as silently as possible, leading the horses for the first 100 yards to minimize noise, then mounting and setting off at a careful walk along the stream. Rylan's plan was to follow the water for a mile or so, then cut east into rougher terrain where pursuing riders would have difficulty following in the dark. The moon provided enough light to see the way, but the shadows beneath the trees were deep and concealing. They had traveled perhaps half a mile when the first shot rang out behind them, followed quickly by shouts and the sound of horses being ridden hard. "Ride," Rylan urged, spurring his stallion forward. "Don't stop for anything." Olivia needed no encouragement. kicking her mare into a gallop alongside him. The terrain was treacherous in the moonlight, with hidden rocks and fallen logs threatening to bring down their horses at every stride, but both animals were sure-footed and determined. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew steadily closer. Yellow Teeth and his companions knew the game was up and were abandoning stealth for speed. The stream they had been following emptied into a larger river, its waters running swift and deep between rocky banks. Rylan pulled up at the water's edge, quickly scanning for a safe crossing. There, he pointed to a section where the river widened and appeared shallower. "We can cross there." "It looks deep," Olivia observed, her voice tight with worry. "We don't have a choice," Rylan replied, already urging his stallion into the water. "They're gaining on us." The crossing was indeed deeper than it had appeared, the water rising to their horses' bellies as they waded into the main current. The animals struggled against the force of the water, snorting and tossing their heads nervously. Halfway across, Olivia's mare suddenly lost its footing on the slick riverbed, stumbling sideways in the current. Olivia cried out, clutching Emma with one arm and the saddle horn with the other as the horse fought to regain its balance. Rylan reacted instantly, turning his stallion against the current and grabbing the mare's bridle. For a heart-stopping moment, it seemed both horses might be swept away. But then the mare found solid ground beneath her hooves and surged forward, pulling herself out of the deeper water. They reached the far bank just as the first of their pursuers arrived at the river behind them. Gunshots cracked through the night air, bullets kicking up spray from the water but falling short of their targets. "Keep going," Rylan urged, pushing his sodden hat back on his head. "They'll have to find another crossing point. That'll buy us some time." They rode through the night, stopping only when necessary to rest the horses or tend to Emma, who remained remarkably calm throughout the ordeal, as if sensing the need for quiet. By dawn, they had put considerable distance between themselves and their pursuers, though Rylan knew Yellow Teeth would not give up easily. The terrain had changed dramatically, the forest giving way to a high alpine meadow surrounded by towering peaks. In the distance, a thin column of smoke rose against the morning sky. "Could be a ranch," Rylan suggested, pointing to the smoke. "Or a trapper's cabin. Either way, it means people." "Will they help us?" Olivia asked, her face drawn with exhaustion, her clothes still damp from the river crossing. "We'll have to take that chance," Rylan replied. "The horses need rest, and so do you and Emma. We can't keep pushing like this." They approached the source of the smoke cautiously, eventually coming upon a small but well-maintained cabin set against the base of a cliff. A corral held several horses, and a barn stood nearby, indicating a permanent homestead rather than a temporary camp. As they rode closer, a man emerged from the cabin, a rifle held casually but ready in his arms. He was tall and lean, with a gray-streaked beard and the weathered look of someone who had spent decades in the mountains. "That's far enough," the man called when they were within speaking distance. "State your business." Rylan reined in his stallion, raising his hand slightly to show he meant no harm. "Name's Rylan Isaacs. This is Olivia Carson and her daughter, Emma. We're heading to Montana Territory but have men on our trail. We're looking for a safe place to rest for a few hours." The man studied them for a long moment, his eyes taking in Olivia's exhausted posture, the baby in her sling, and their bedraggled appearance. "What kind of men?" he asked finally. "Bad ones," Rylan replied simply. "They're trying to claim Olivia and her child for a debt her late husband owed. I helped them get away in a town called Redemption Creek, and these men have been hunting us ever since." The man's expression softened slightly. "Debt collectors, never did have much use for that type." He lowered his rifle. I'm Jacob Hansen. This is my place. You're welcome to rest here, though I can't promise how much help I'd be if trouble comes calling. Thank you, Mr. Hansen, Olivia said, relief evident in her voice. We won't impose for long, just enough to rest and warm up. Hansen nodded, gesturing toward the barn. Put your horses in there. They look about done in. Then come inside and get yourselves dry. My wife will have breakfast going. The inside of the cabin was surprisingly spacious and comfortable, with a large stone fireplace, sturdy hand-made furniture, and shelves lined with books and keepsakes. Hansen's wife, Martha, was a small, energetic woman with kind eyes and capable hands. She took one look at Olivia and Emma and immediately set about making them comfortable. "You poor dears," she clucked, taking Emma while Olivia removed her wet outer clothes. "Riding all night in this cold. Come sit by the fire. I've got porridge keeping warm and fresh bread just out of the oven." Rylan hung back, awkward in the domestic setting, but Jacob Hansen clapped him on the shoulder and steered him toward the fire as well. "You look as done in as your lady," the older man observed. "Sit. Eat. Then you can tell us the whole story." Over breakfast, Rylan and Olivia took turns explaining their situation, from the auction block in Redemption Creek to the pursuit of the previous night. The Hansens listened without interruption, their expressions growing increasingly sympathetic. "You did right by them," Jacob said to Rylan when they had finished. "Not many would have stepped in like that." "It wasn't a choice," Rylan replied simply. "It was the right thing to do." Martha, who had been gently rocking Emma in her arms, looked up with a knowing smile. "And now? Is it still just about doing the right thing?" Rylan felt heat creep up his neck under the older woman's perceptive gaze. Before he could formulate a response, Jacob intervened. "Leave the boy be, Martha. His reasons are his own." He turned to Rylan. "How far behind you reckon those men are?" "Hard to say," Rylan replied, grateful for the change of subject. "The river crossing slowed them down, but they'll find a way across eventually. I'd guess they're maybe 3-4 hours behind us now." Jacob nodded thoughtfully. "There's a pass about 10 miles north of here. Takes you through to the next valley. If you leave soon, you can reach it by midday. Once you're through, the trail splits. Most folks take the western fork as it's easier going. You take the eastern. It's rougher, but it comes out closer to the Montana border." "How rough?" Rylan asked, concerned about Olivia and Emma. "Nothing your horses can't handle, especially if that stallion of yours is as strong as he looks," Jacob assured him. "But men who don't know the country might lose your trail, especially if they take the western fork first." It was a good plan, and Rylan said as much. But Olivia, who had been listening intently, shook her head. "We can't leave yet," she said firmly. "The horses need more rest than a few hours, and Emma needs time out of that sling. If we push too hard, we risk all of us." Rylan wanted to argue, to insist that putting more distance between them and Yellow Teeth was the priority, but one look at Olivia's exhausted face silenced him. She was right. They couldn't keep going at this pace. "You're welcome to stay the day," Martha offered. "Rest up, let the little one have some time to stretch and play. You can leave at dawn tomorrow." "That's very generous," Olivia said gratefully. "But we can't put you at risk. If those men track us here, let them come," Jacob interrupted, his voice hardening. "This is my home. I've defended it against worse than debt collectors in my time." The decision made, they settled in for a day of rest. Jacob took Rylan out to tend to the horses, showing him the barn and corral while explaining more about the route they would take the following day. "That woman of yours," Jacob said as they worked, "she's a fighter." "She's not my woman," Rylan corrected automatically. Jacob gave him a skeptical look. "Could have fooled me the way you look at her, and the way she looks at you when you're not watching." Rylan paused in his brushing of the stallion. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Jacob said patiently, "that there's more between you two than just a cowboy helping a woman in trouble. Maybe you haven't admitted it to yourselves yet, but it's plain as day to those of us watching." Rylan resumed brushing, unsure how to respond. The old mountain man's words had stirred something in him, a hope he had scarcely allowed himself to acknowledge. "I'm taking her to a friend's ranch in Montana," he said finally. "She'll have work there, a safe place for her and Emma. That's all." "If you say so," Jacob replied, clearly unconvinced. "But take it from a man who spent 40 years married to the same woman. When you find something real, you don't let it go. Not for anything." Back inside the cabin, Olivia was helping Martha prepare the midday meal, Emma contentedly playing on a blanket by the fire. The domestic scene hit Rylan with unexpected force, especially after Jacob's words. For the first time, he allowed himself to truly imagine a future with Olivia and Emma, not just delivering them safely to Oscar Werner's ranch, but staying with them, building a life together. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. Rylan had been alone for so long, responsible only for himself, that the idea of being a husband and father for that was what he was considering. He realized with a jolt, seemed almost impossible to grasp. And yet, watching Olivia laugh at something Martha had said, seeing the way she instinctively checked on Emma every few moments, Rylan knew with sudden clarity that he wanted that future more than he had ever wanted anything. The question was, did Olivia want it too? And even if she did, would she want it with him, a drifting cowboy with little to offer but his heart and his hands? As if sensing his thoughts, Olivia looked up and met his gaze across the room. Something passed between them in that moment, an unspoken current of feeling that made his breath catch. She smiled, a small, private smile meant only for him, before returning her attention to the vegetables she was chopping. That smile gave Rylan hope. Maybe, just maybe, she felt it too. The day passed peacefully, with no sign of Yellow Teeth and his companions. Jacob kept watch from a high point near the cabin, but reported no movement on the trail they had used. "Might have lost your trail at the river," he suggested as they ate supper that evening. "Or they could be waiting for daylight to track you further." "Either way, we leave at first light," Rylan decided. "The sooner we reach Montana territory, the better." That night, Martha insisted that Olivia and Emma take their small second bedroom while Rylan and Jacob would sleep in the main room near the fire. As they prepared for bed, Rylan found himself alone with Olivia for a moment, Emma already asleep in a cradle Martha had brought down from the attic. "Thank you for today," Olivia said softly, "for agreeing to rest, even though I know you wanted to push on." "You were right," Rylan admitted. "We all needed the rest, and the Hansons have been more than kind." Olivia nodded, her fingers absently touching the silver locket he had given her in Elk Fork. "They remind me of what a home can be, what a marriage can be after decades together." "They seem happy," Rylan agreed. "They are," she said thoughtfully. "Martha told me they've had their share of hardships, lost children, harsh winters, years of struggle, but they faced it all together, and that made the difference." There was a question in her eyes, an invitation that Rylan was almost afraid to acknowledge. This was the moment, he realized, the moment to speak what was in his heart, or to remain silent and perhaps lose his chance forever. "Olivia," he began, his voice surprisingly steady despite the thundering of his heart, "when we reach Montana, I don't want to just leave you and Emma at Oscar's ranch and ride away." Her eyes widened slightly. "What do you want, Rylan?" "I want." The words stuck in his throat, years of solitude and self-reliance making them difficult to voice. "I want to stay with you, with Emma, if you'll have me." The silence that followed his declaration seemed to stretch for an eternity. Rylan could hear the crackling of the fire, the soft sounds of Emma's breathing, the distant howl of a wolf in the mountains. But all that mattered was Olivia's face, her eyes searching his as if trying to read the truth of his words. "Are you asking to court me, Rylan Isaacs?" she asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm asking for more than that," he replied honestly. "I know it's sudden. I know we haven't known each other long, but I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you and Emma. I want to build a life with you both." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes, but they were accompanied by a smile that lit her entire face. "I was so afraid you would leave us," she admitted. "That once we reached Montana, you'd feel your duty was done." "It was never about duty," Rylan said, taking a step closer to her. "Not after the first day, maybe not even then." Olivia closed the distance between them, her hand reaching up to touch his face. "I feel the same way," she whispered. "I've been falling in love with you since Redemption Creek, when you put us on your horse and said not today, when you chose us." Rylan covered her hand with his own, turning his face to press a kiss to her palm. "I'll always choose you, both of you." Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, both of them still scarcely believing this moment was real. But the second was deeper, filled with all the unspoken feelings that had been building between them over their journey together. When they finally parted, Olivia rested her forehead against his chest, her arms encircling his waist. "What happens now?" she asked softly. "We go to Montana," Rylan replied, holding her close. "We help Oscar build his ranch, and we build our life together, if that's what you want." She looked up at him, her eyes shining with joy and certainty. "It's exactly what I want, what we both want, Emma and I." The sound of a throat clearing interrupted their moment. They turned to find Martha standing in the doorway, a knowing smile on her face. "I just came to bring fresh water for the night," she said, placing a pitcher on the small bedside table. "But I see you two have things to discuss, so I'll leave you to it." "Thank you, Martha," Olivia said, a blush coloring her cheeks, "for everything." The older woman's smile softened. "Love's a rare and precious thing in this wild country," she said. "Hold tight to it when you find it." After Martha had gone, Rylan reluctantly stepped back, knowing that propriety demanded they part for the night, especially under someone else's roof. "I should let you rest," he said, though everything in him wanted to stay. Olivia nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Tomorrow," she promised. "Tomorrow we'll begin our journey together, all three of us." Rylan returned to the main room where Jacob was banking the fire for the night. The older man took one look at Rylan's face and chuckled. "Told you so," he said simply, before rolling into his blankets and promptly beginning to snore. Rylan settled into his own bedroll, but sleep eluded him for hours, his mind filled with plans and dreams for the future that now seemed possible, a future with Olivia and Emma by his side. Dawn broke clear and cold, with frost silvering the ground around the Hanson cabin. They prepared to leave immediately after a hearty breakfast, Jacob providing them with detailed directions for the route ahead while Martha packed food for their journey. "The pass will take you about 4 hours to cross," Jacob explained. "On the other side, remember to take the eastern fork, not the western. It'll add a day to your journey but might throw off anyone following you." "We can't thank you enough for your help," Olivia said, embracing Martha warmly. "Just take care of each other," the older woman replied, kissing Emma's forehead before handing her back to Olivia. "And come visit us sometime. We get lonely up here in the winters." Jacob pulled Rylan aside as the women said their goodbyes. "One more piece of advice," he said quietly. "About 10 miles past the fork, there's an old trapper's cabin. Good place to spend the night and easy to defend if those men are still on your trail." "I appreciate all your help," Rylan said, extending his hand. Jacob grasped it firmly. "You're doing right by them," he said, nodding toward Olivia and Emma. "That's all a man can do in this life." They departed with the rising sun at their backs, the horses fresh and eager after their day of rest. Olivia rode beside Rylan, Emma secure in her carrying sling, her expression one of contentment despite the dangers that might still lie ahead. "What are you thinking?" Rylan asked, noticing her smile. "I'm thinking about Montana," she replied. "About what our home might look like. What it will be like to watch Emma grow up there." "Our home," Rylan repeated, savoring the words. "I like the sound of that." The pass Jacob had described was a narrow defile between towering peaks, the trail occasionally so tight that they had to ride single file. But the weather held, and by early afternoon they had crested the highest point and begun their descent into the valley beyond. As Jacob had promised, the trail forked at the bottom of the pass. Most travelers would instinctively choose the western route, which followed a clear creek through relatively open terrain. The eastern fork looked less inviting, climbing back into rougher country through dense forest. "East it is," Rylan said, turning his stallion onto the less traveled path. The going was slower on this trail, but Rylan felt the wisdom of Jacob's advice. Anyone tracking them would likely follow the western fork first, giving them precious time to put distance between themselves and their pursuers. By late afternoon, they had covered perhaps 7 miles from the fork, the forest growing denser around them as they climbed. Rylan kept a careful eye on Olivia, concerned that the difficult terrain might be too taxing for her and Emma, but she rode confidently, her mare picking its way carefully along the rocky trail. "Jacob said there's a cabin a few more miles ahead," Rylan told her during a brief stop to rest the horses. "We can spend the night there, get an early start tomorrow." Olivia nodded, gently rocking Emma, who had begun to fuss. "She's hungry," she explained, "and probably tired of the sling. A night with a roof over our heads would be welcome." They continued on as the sun began to set, the forest shadows deepening around them. Rylan rode slightly ahead, alert for any sign of the cabin Jacob had mentioned. They found it just as dusk was giving way to true darkness, a small, sturdy structure built of logs and stone, set in a small clearing with a spring nearby. It was clearly abandoned, with no smoke rising from the chimney and the door secured with a simple wooden bar. Rylan helped Olivia dismount before checking the cabin thoroughly. Inside, it was a single room with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table and chairs, and a platform bed filled with old but clean straw. "It's not the Palmer house," Rylan said, returning to where Olivia waited with the horses, "but it's solid and dry. No signs anyone's been here recently." They settled in quickly, Rylan building a fire in the fireplace while Olivia fed and changed Emma. By the time the cabin was warm, Emma was asleep, and Olivia had prepared a simple meal from their supplies. "I could get used to this," Rylan commented as they ate by firelight, the cabin cozy around them. "To what?" Olivia asked, her eyes reflecting the dancing flames. "This," he gestured between them, "us, sharing a meal, a fire, making a home even if it's just for a night." Her smile warmed him more than the fire. "I already am used to it," she admitted. "I can't imagine my life without you in it now, Rylan." He reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "You won't have to," he promised. "Whatever happens, we face it together from now on." They retired early, both tired from the day's journey. The bed, though rough, was large enough for both of them, with Emma nestled in a basket nearby. For the first time since they had met, they slept in each other's arms, Olivia's head resting on Rylan's chest, his arms holding her securely against him. It was the most natural thing in the world, Rylan thought as he drifted toward sleep. Like finding a home he never knew he was searching for. The sound of Emma's crying woke them just before dawn. Olivia stirred in Rylan's arms, murmuring softly as she came awake. "I'll get her," Rylan offered, pressing a kiss to Olivia's forehead. He rose and gently lifted Emma from her basket, cradling her awkwardly but carefully. "Good morning, little one," he whispered. "Let's let your mama sleep a bit longer, shall we?" To his surprise, Emma quieted in his arms, her wide eyes fixed on his face with what seemed like intense curiosity. Rylan carried her to the window, where the first gray light of dawn was just becoming visible through the trees. "That's Montana out there," he told her softly. "Going to be your home, our home. You'll grow up strong and free, with mountains to climb and streams to fish. And your mama and I will be right there with you, every step of the way." Emma made a small, contented sound, her tiny hand finding and gripping his finger with surprising strength. "Already got a good grip," he commented. "You'll make a fine horsewoman someday." "She already takes after you," Olivia's voice came from the bed, where she was watching them with tender amusement. "Strong-willed and fearless." Rylan turned, Emma still in his arms. "Did we wake you? I was trying to let you sleep a little longer." "Watching the two people I love most in the world is better than sleep," she replied, sitting up and stretching. "But she'll be getting hungry soon." Rylan carefully brought Emma to Olivia, marveling at how natural this felt, the three of them together in this small cabin, beginning their day as a family. They broke their fast with coffee and the last of Martha's bread, then prepared to continue their journey. As Rylan was saddling the horses, he paused, his senses suddenly alert to something not quite right in the surrounding forest. A moment later, he heard the faint but unmistakable sound of a horse snorting, quickly hushed by its rider. Someone was in the trees, watching the cabin. Rylan secured the cinch on his saddle with deliberate movements, not wanting to alert whoever was watching that he had detected their presence. He led both horses to the cabin door. "Trouble?" Olivia asked immediately, reading his expression. "Someone's out there," he confirmed in a low voice. "At least one rider, maybe more. Yellow teeth. Most likely. Get Emma ready to ride, but stay inside until I tell you." Rylan checked his revolver, then his rifle before stepping back outside, seemingly to check the horse's tack again. His eyes scanned the tree line systematically, searching for any movement or reflection that might betray a watcher's position. There a glint of metal among the pines about 100 yards to the west. Someone with a rifle or spyglass, partially hidden but visible if you knew where to look. Rylan pretended not to notice, continuing his preparations as if unaware of the danger. His mind raced, considering their options. They could try to make a run for it, but with Emma to consider, that was risky. They could stay in the cabin, which offered some protection, but they would effectively be trapped. Or they could try a third option. Rylan returned inside, where Olivia was waiting, Emma already secured in her carrying sling. "I count at least 2 of them," he told her. "They're set up to ambush us when we leave." "What do we do?" Olivia asked, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. Rylan quickly outlined his plan. It was risky, but if executed perfectly, it might give them the advantage they needed. Olivia listened intently, then nodded. "I can do my part, but Rylan, promise me no heroics. Emma and I need you." "I promise," he said, kissing her briefly but fiercely. "On the count of 3, then." Rylan positioned himself by the cabin's single window, rifle ready. Olivia stood by the door with both horses' reins in hand. 1, Rylan counted softly. 2, 3. Olivia threw open the door and led both horses out at a run, as if making a break for it. Immediately, shots rang out from the trees, kicking up dirt around her feet. But Olivia wasn't the target Rylan had anticipated Yellow Teeth would focus on. Instead, his rifle was trained on the window where Yellow Teeth would expect Rylan to appear, covering Olivia's escape. Instead, Rylan burst through the door behind Olivia, firing rapidly at the muzzle flashes visible among the trees. His first shot struck, true a cry of pain, indicated he had hit one of their attackers. Olivia had reached the edge of the clearing, pulling both horses into the cover of the trees on the opposite side from their attackers. Rylan sprinted after her, zigzagging to make himself a harder target. More shots followed him, but the ambushers were now in disarray, their carefully planned trap disrupted by Rylan's unexpected tactics. He reached Olivia and the horses just as Yellow Teeth, and his remaining companion one seemed to be missing. Presumably the one Rylan had hit emerged from the trees across the clearing, firing as they advanced. "Go," Rylan urged, helping Olivia mount her mare. "Follow the trail north. Don't stop for anything." He swung up onto his stallion and they were off, crashing through the underbrush as bullets whined overhead. Behind them, they could hear Yellow Teeth cursing, followed by the sounds of men mounting their own horses. The chase was on again, but this time, Rylan and Olivia had a head start and the advantage of knowing their route. They rode hard, the horses responding to their riders' urgency with bursts of speed that ate up the miles. The trail grew steeper as they climbed, winding through dense forest before emerging onto a high ridge with breathtaking views of the valley below. In the far distance, they could see the plains of Montana Territory stretching to the horizon. "We're close," Rylan called to Olivia. "Montana's just beyond that next range of hills." She nodded, her face set with determination despite the exhaustion evident in her posture. Emma, remarkably, had slept through much of their flight, lulled by the motion of the horse and securely fastened in her sling. They paused briefly at the crest of the ridge to rest the horses and check their back trail. Far below, they could see two riders moving steadily up the path they had taken. "They're still coming," Olivia observed. "But they are hours behind us now," Rylan replied. "And once we cross into Montana Territory, they'll be outside their usual hunting grounds. We might just make it." They continued on, the trail now beginning to descend toward the valley that would take them into Montana. By mid-afternoon, they had reached the valley floor, where a wide river marked the unofficial border between territories. As they approached the river, Rylan felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. They were almost there, almost safe. The river crossing was easier than the one they had attempted during their night escape, with a clear ford marked by stones placed in the stream bed. They crossed without incident, their horses splashing through the knee-deep water eagerly. On the far bank, Rylan reined in his stallion and turned to Olivia with a grin. "Welcome to Montana Territory," he said. "How does it feel?" "Like home," she replied, her smile radiant despite the trials of the past days. They continued at a more moderate pace now, the immediate danger behind them. According to Jacob Hansen's directions, Oscar Werner's ranch was still a day's ride north, but they were firmly in Montana now, and the landscape was opening up before them, rolling hills covered in grass that would turn green with the spring, stands of pine and aspen providing shelter and wood, and in the distance, the jagged peaks of higher mountains, their tops already white with early snow. By nightfall, they had reached a small settlement little more than a trading post, a smithy, and a few scattered cabins called Liberty. The proprietor of the trading post, a garrulous man named Peterson, welcomed them warmly when Rylan mentioned Oscar Werner's name. "Werner? Sure, I know him. Got that big spread about 20 miles north of here." Building himself quite a place from what I hear. You friends of his?" "I am," Rylan confirmed. "Worked with him on cattle drives years back. He offered me a position at his ranch." "Well, any friend of Werner's is welcome here," Peterson declared. "Got a room in the back you can use for the night. Not fancy, but it's clean. And the missus can fix you a hot meal." They accepted gratefully, too tired to consider traveling further that day. Peterson's wife, a cheerful woman with a talent for cooking, provided them with the best meal they had eaten since Elk Fork, complete with fresh bread, venison stew, and apple pie for dessert. As they ate, Peterson regaled them with news of the territory and particularly of Oscar Werner's ranch, which he described as the coming thing in the valley. "Got about 10 hands working for him now," Peterson said, refilling their coffee cups. "Building a proper house, not just a cabin. Word is he's planning to bring in blooded stock from back east, really build something special." "Sounds like Oscar," Rylan agreed. "He never does anything halfway." "You'll be a welcome addition," Peterson assured him. "Man with your experience on the trail. And your missus and little one will be a sight for sore eyes at the ranch. Not many women out this way yet, though that's changing fast as the territory grows." Rylan didn't correct Peterson's assumption about his relationship with Olivia. In his heart, she was already his wife, though they had yet to formalize their commitment. That would come once they were settled at the ranch, he had decided. He would do things properly, give Olivia the wedding she deserved. That night, in the simple but comfortable room Peterson had provided, Rylan held Olivia close, their bodies fitting together as if made for each other. "We made it," he murmured against her hair. "Against all odds, we made it to Montana. Was there ever any doubt?" She asked, a teasing note in her voice. "Plenty," he admitted. "But I would have fought the devil himself to get you and Emma here safely." She tilted her face up to his, her eyes serious in the dim light. "I know you would have. That's why I love you, Rylan Isaacs. You're a man who keeps his promises, who does what's right no matter the cost." He kissed her then, pouring all the love and gratitude he felt into the gesture. When they finally parted, both breathless, he said, "When we reach Oscar's ranch and get settled, I want to make it official. I want to marry you, Olivia, if you'll have me." "I thought you'd never ask," she replied, her smile luminous in the darkness. "Yes, Rylan, 1,000 times yes." The following morning dawned clear and crisp, a perfect autumn day in Montana. They departed Liberty after breakfast, following Peterson's directions north toward Oscar Werner's ranch. The terrain was gentler here than in the mountains they had traversed, with rolling hills giving way to a broad valley, bisected by a clear, fast-flowing river. Stands of aspen, their leaves golden in the autumn sunlight, dotted the landscape, while pine forests clothed the higher slopes on either side of the valley. "It's beautiful," Olivia commented as they rode side by side, Emma awake and observing the scenery with wide-eyed fascination. "I can see why your friend chose this place for his ranch. Oscar always had an eye for good land," Rylan agreed. "He talked about Montana for years before he finally had the means to come here. Said it was the last best place where a man could build something that would last generations." They rode at an easy pace, no longer pursued, enjoying the journey and each other's company. By mid-afternoon, they crested a low rise and the Werner Ranch came into view below them. It was impressive, even in its partially completed state. A large main house, built of squared logs and stone, stood on a slight rise overlooking the valley. A bunkhouse, barn, corral, and various outbuildings were arranged nearby, while beyond them stretched fenced pastures where cattle and horses grazed. "There it is," Rylan said, a note of pride in his voice. "Werner's dream, he calls it." As they approached, A figure emerged from the main house, shading his eyes against the sun as he observed their arrival. Even at a distance, Rylan recognized the tall, broad-shouldered form of Oscar Werner. "Rylan Isaacs, as I live and breathe," Oscar called as they rode into the yard. "About time you showed up." Rylan dismounted, grinning as he clasped arms with his old friend. Oscar Werner was in his mid-30s, with a weathered face, keen blue eyes, and a beard that did little to hide his wide smile. "Had some adventures on the way," Rylan explained. "Oscar, I'd like you to meet Olivia Carson and her daughter, Emma." Oscar's eyebrows rose as he took in Olivia on her mare, Emma in her sling. His gaze moved from them to Rylan, a question in his eyes. "It's a long story," Rylan said simply. "And one I look forward to hearing," Oscar replied, his smile returning as he stepped forward to help Olivia dismount. "Welcome to Werner's dream, Mrs. Carson. You and your daughter are most welcome here." "Thank you, Mr. Werner," Olivia replied, accepting his assistance. "Rylan has told us much about you and your ranch." "All good, I hope." Oscar led them toward the main house. "Come inside, both of you. You must be tired from your journey. We can talk over coffee and food." The interior of the main house was still under construction, with some rooms complete and others merely framed out. The large kitchen, however, was fully functional, with a massive fireplace, a sturdy table surrounded by chairs, and gleaming copper pots hanging from hooks. A woman was working at the stove, tall, capable-looking, with dark hair pulled back in a practical bun. She turned as they entered, her face lighting up at the sight of visitors. "Sarah, look who finally arrived," Oscar announced. "Rylan Isaacs, and he's brought guests." "About time," the woman replied, wiping her hands on her apron. "We were beginning to think you'd changed your mind." "Sarah Werner, my sister," Oscar explained to Olivia. "She keeps house for me and makes sure I don't work the men to death." Introductions were made all around, and soon they were seated at the kitchen table, mugs of coffee before them, and Emma contentedly exploring a soft blanket spread on the floor nearby. Rylan and Olivia took turns explaining their journey, from the auction block in Redemption Creek to their pursuit by Yellow Teeth and his companions. Oscar and Sarah listened with growing amazement. "So you bought her freedom at auction, then fought off debt collectors across 3 territories to get here," Oscar summarized when they had finished. "That doesn't sound like the solitary cowboy I remember from our trail driving days." "People change," Rylan replied simply. Oscar's gaze moved between Rylan and Olivia, noting the way they sat close together, the looks they exchanged. "Indeed they do," he said with a knowing smile. "And for the better, from what I can see." Sarah rose to check on something in the oven, patting Olivia's shoulder as she passed. "You must be exhausted, my dear. After you've eaten, I'll show you to a room where you and Emma can rest. Tomorrow is soon enough to discuss what comes next." But Rylan was ready to discuss it now. "Oscar, when you offered me the foreman position, you mentioned there would be a cabin for me eventually. I'm hoping that offer might be expanded to include a family." Oscar's eyebrows shot up. "A family, you two are." "Not yet officially," Rylan clarified, taking Olivia's hand. "But soon, if she'll still have me." "If," Olivia's voice was teasing. "After all we've been through together, do you think I'd change my mind now?" Oscar laughed, a booming sound that filled the kitchen. "Well, this calls for a celebration. Sarah, bring out that bottle of whiskey I've been saving. And don't worry about the cabin, Rylan. We can start building it tomorrow. In the meantime, the east wing of the house is nearly finished, private rooms with their own entrance. You 3 can stay there until your own place is ready." "And I could use help with 100 things around here," Sarah added, returning with the whiskey bottle. "Olivia, if you're willing, there's plenty of work for capable hands." "I'd be glad to help in any way I can," Olivia replied sincerely. "We've been on the receiving end of kindness for so long. I'm eager to give back." As Oscar poured whiskey for the adults and a small glass of sweet wine for Olivia, who was still nursing Emma, the conversation turned to the ranch, its operations, its future plans, the community that was slowly growing around it. "We're building something special here," Oscar declared, his eyes alight with passion for his project. "Not just a ranch, but a legacy, a place where good people can put down roots, raise families, build lives worth living." "That's what we want too," Rylan said, his arm around Olivia's shoulders. "A place to belong, a home." "Then you found it," Oscar raised his glass in a toast. "To new beginnings, old friends, and the family we choose." "To family," they all echoed, glasses touching with a crystal chime that seemed to promise a bright future. Later, after a hearty meal and more conversation, Sarah showed them to their rooms in the East Wing. The space was simple but comfortable, with a large bedroom, a smaller adjoining room perfect for Emma, and a sitting area with a stone fireplace. "It's not quite finished," Sarah apologized, gesturing to the unpainted walls and unfinished trim. "But the roof doesn't leak, the chimney draws well, and the beds have fresh mattresses." "It's perfect," Olivia assured her, taking in the space with obvious delight. "More than perfect." Left alone at last, Rylan built a fire in the small hearth while Olivia settled Emma for the night in the adjoining room. When she returned, he was standing by the window, gazing out at the mountains silhouetted against the darkening sky. "Happy?" she asked, coming to stand beside him. "More than I ever thought possible," he replied, drawing her into his arms. "When I left Texas to come here, I thought I was just accepting a job. I never imagined I was heading toward a whole new life. A family. A home. When Emma and I were put on that auction block, I thought our lives were over," Olivia admitted, resting her head against his chest. "I couldn't see any way out. And then you appeared, like an answer to a prayer I was afraid to voice." Rylan tightened his arms around her. "We saved each other, I think." They stood together in companionable silence, watching as the first stars appeared in the deepening blue of the Montana sky. Their journey had been long and fraught with danger, but here, at last, they had found their haven, not just a place, but a life together. "What do you think Yellow Teeth will do now?" Olivia asked eventually. "Will he give up?" "Hard to say," Rylan replied honestly. "Men like that don't like to lose. But we're in Montana now, far from his usual territory. And Oscar has influence in this valley. I think we're safe here." "Good," she said decisively. "Because I have plans for us, Rylan Isaacs, plans that don't include running from debt collectors." "Oh," he smiled down at her. "What kind of plans?" "A wedding, for starters," she replied. "A simple one but proper. Then a home of our own, that cabin Oscar mentioned. And maybe in time brothers or sisters for Emma." "I like these plans," Rylan said, his heart swelling with love and hope. "All of them." "I thought you might." She rose on tiptoe to kiss him, a kiss full of promise for their future together. Outside, the Montana night deepened, stars blanketing the sky above Werner's dream ranch. Inside, in a room warmed by firelight and love, Rylan Isaacs and Olivia Carson held each other close, their long journey at an end, their new life together just beginning. And in the small adjoining room, Emma Carson, soon to be Emma Isaacs, slept peacefully, safe at last, her future as bright and boundless as the Montana sky. 2 years later, Rylan stood on the porch of their cabin, watching as Olivia played with Emma in the yard. The little girl, now nearly 3, was chasing butterflies while her mother looked on, one hand resting on the slight swell of her belly where their second child was growing. The cabin had been completed within 6 months of their arrival at Werner's dream, a sturdy structure of logs and stone built with the help of everyone on the ranch. It stood on a gentle rise overlooking a bend in the river, with mountains visible in the distance and aspen trees providing shade in summer. Their wedding had been a joyous affair, held in the newly completed main house of the ranch, with Oscar serving as Rylan's best man and Sarah standing up for Olivia. Emma, though too young to understand the proceedings, had stolen the show in a tiny dress Sarah had sewn for her, toddling down the makeshift aisle with a crown of wildflowers on her dark curls. Life at Werner's dream had settled into a rhythm that suited them all. Rylan served as foreman, overseeing the ranch's growing operations with a natural leadership that earned him the respect of the other hands. Olivia had found her place too, working alongside Sarah in the main house while also tending their own home and garden. Emma had thrived in the open spaces of Montana, growing from a quiet baby into an adventurous, curious child who delighted in exploring the ranch under her parents' watchful eyes. She called Rylan Papa now, a title he cherished more than any he had ever held. And soon, their family would grow again. The new baby was due in the spring, a time of renewal and promise. There had been no sign of Yellow Teeth or his companions in the 2 years since their arrival. Whatever had become of the debt collectors, they had not pursued their quarry into Montana territory. Perhaps they had given up, or perhaps they had met with misfortune elsewhere. Rylan didn't waste time wondering. The threat they had posed was firmly in the past. As he watched his wife and daughter in the yard, Rylan reflected on the journey that had brought them here. That moment in Redemption Creek, when he had put Olivia and Emma on his horse and said, "Not today," to the men who thought they could own another human being, had changed everything. It had set them on a path that led here to this home, this life, this love. Olivia looked up, catching his eye across the yard. Her smile, radiant in the afternoon sunlight, still had the power to take his breath away. She whispered something to Emma, who turned and raced toward the porch, arms outstretched. "Papa, Papa, come see the butterfly I found." Rylan swept her up into his arms, her small body warm against his chest, her eyes so like her mother's alight with excitement and trust. "Show me," he said, carrying her back to where Olivia waited. Together, the three of them soon to be four bent to examine the delicate creature resting on a wildflower. A perfect moment in a life that, against all odds, had become everything Rylan had never known he wanted. Not just a place to belong, but people to belong to. Not just a house, but a home. Not just survival, but a life worth living. All because on that fateful day in Redemption Creek he had chosen to act. To put a young woman and her baby on his horse and say, simply but definitively, "Not today."